Most people think Libra is powerful only when life is beautiful, when the room is calm, when the path is clear, when love feels easy, when everything still looks graceful from the outside. But that is not where Libra becomes unforgettable. The real power of Libra shows up when life falls apart, when the plan dies, when the relationship ends, when the city no longer feels like home, when the job that once looked perfect starts feeling like a slow death, when the version of life they worked so hard to build suddenly feels too small, too fake, too heavy to carry anymore. That is the moment most people panic. That is the moment most people cling harder to the old identity, to the old title, to the old love, to the old routine, to the old version of themselves. But Libra has a different kind of strength. Libra can start over from nothing and still move like they were never truly empty. That is what people do not understand. They see Libra as soft. They see elegance, beauty, charm, calm energy, a gentle voice, a pleasing presence. They think softness means fragility. They think grace means weakness. They think someone who loves balance must be terrified of chaos. But what they miss is this. Libra does not only know how to live beautifully. Libra knows how to rebuild beautifully. And that is much rarer. Because anyone can look composed when life is going well. Anyone can seem confident when the ground is steady. Anyone can smile when the future still makes sense. But when life suddenly wipes the board clean, when everything familiar disappears, when the past no longer fits and the future is still a blur, that is when truth shows up. That is when you find out who can survive without the old story. And Libra can. Not always loudly. Not always quickly. Not always without tears. But powerfully. That is the hidden force inside Libra. They are not as attached to the old version of themselves as people think. They may love deeply. They may invest fully. They may try harder than most people realize to save what can be saved. But once they know in their soul that something is over, they can do something that terrifies almost everyone else. They can let the old life die. Not because it meant nothing. Because it meant enough to deserve honesty. That is the difference. Some people stay in dead situations because they are afraid of looking like a failure. Some people keep wearing an old life long after it stopped fitting because they cannot imagine themselves without it. They do not want to lose the image, the label, the comfort, the history, the explanation they have given the world. So they stay. They stay in careers they have outgrown. They stay in relationships that shrink them. They stay in cities that drain them. They stay in roles that no longer match who they are becoming. And slowly, quietly, they disappear inside their own life. Libra can feel that disappearance. Libra can sense when the balance is fake, when the peace is just performance, when the beauty on the outside is hiding emptiness underneath. And once Libra reaches that point, once the truth becomes too clear to ignore, something inside them shifts. The fear is still there, but the fear stops being in charge. That is when the reset begins. Maybe it starts with work. From the outside, everything looks fine. Good job, good title, good money, respectable path, safe future. Other people would kill for this. They say, be grateful, be smart, do not throw this away. But every morning Libra wakes up feeling farther from themselves. The work is no longer meaningful. The success no longer feels like success. The life they built around that job starts to feel like a costume they are exhausted from wearing. They smile. They show up. They keep going. For a while, they try to make it work. That is important. Libra does not always leave immediately. They negotiate with life first. They try to restore balance before they destroy the structure. They ask themselves if they are being too emotional, too restless, too dramatic. They give it time. They give it grace. They give it another chance. But once they know, they know. And one day, the thing everyone thought they would never leave becomes the exact thing they walk away from. That is the first shock. People call it risky. People call it foolish. People call it unstable. But what they do not see is that Libra is not running from life. Libra is running toward alignment. That changes everything. Because starting over does not always look powerful in the beginning. Sometimes it looks small. Sometimes it looks lonely. Sometimes it looks like losing status, losing certainty, losing applause, losing the version of success other people understood. Sometimes it looks like taking a step back. But with Libra, the step back is often the setup for a leap forward. That is where the real tension lives. For a little while, it may look like Libra lost. A smaller space, a quieter life, a slower beginning, a blank page where a polished identity used to be. But then something starts happening. The eyes get clearer. The energy gets lighter. The voice gets truer. The smile becomes real again. And suddenly it becomes obvious. Libra did not fall apart. Libra stripped away what was false. That is not collapse. That is purification. And it does not only happen with work. Sometimes the reset is bigger than that. Sometimes Libra changes the entire environment. The city, the routine, the circle, the way they live from morning to night. They leave behind the streets that held their old memories. They leave behind the habits that once made sense. They leave behind a place that used to fit them perfectly, but now feels too tight to breathe in. Most people cannot do that. Most people would rather stay somewhere familiar and miserable than risk becoming nobody somewhere new. But Libra has a strange gift. They can survive becoming nobody for a while. That may be one of the most dangerous strengths a person can have. Because when you are no longer terrified of starting from zero, you become very hard to trap. Think about that. If someone cannot scare you with loneliness, you are harder to control. If someone cannot manipulate you with comfort, you are harder to contain. If someone cannot keep you in place by reminding you how much you invested already, you are harder to break. And Libra, once fully awake, becomes exactly that person. Yes, the beginning hurts. Let us tell the truth about that. Starting over is not aesthetic in the middle. It is not glamorous. It is not some perfect movie montage where everything suddenly glows. Real reinvention is messy. It is silence. It is doubt. It is strange rooms and unfamiliar mornings. It is wondering if you made the right choice. It is missing people you had to leave behind. It is feeling the full weight of your own freedom. It is terrifying. But here is where Libra becomes different. They do not need the middle to look beautiful in order to keep going. They keep going anyway. That is the second shock. Because people assume Libra only thrives in pleasant conditions. They assume Libra needs everything to be harmonious before they can function. But the deeper truth is more impressive than that. Libra may prefer beauty, but they are not dependent on comfort. Once they decide a life is no longer theirs, they can walk straight through discomfort to get to something real. And when they come out the other side, they do not just return. They return refined. That is the part no one expects. When Libra breaks, the world often assumes they are finished. They seem too tender, too loving, too attached to connection, too affected by what they feel. So when heartbreak comes, when betrayal comes, when disappointment hits, people assume Libra will remain shattered by it. And for a little while, maybe they do shatter. Maybe they cry harder than anyone knows. Maybe they go silent. Maybe they lose their appetite for everything. Maybe they question their own judgment. Maybe they sit in the dark with all the pieces and no map. But never underestimate what happens next. Because Libra has a quiet genius for reconstruction. They study the ruins. They notice what was missing. They notice what they ignored. They notice where they betrayed themselves to keep peace. They notice where they made excuses for what was already broken. And then they change. Not just the hairstyle. Not just the wardrobe. Not just the social circle. The standard changes. The self-respect changes. The emotional threshold changes. The way they love changes. The way they choose changes. The way they walk into a room changes. That is why Libra after heartbreak can feel almost unrecognizable. Softer in some ways. Stronger in deeper ways. Kinder, but less available for nonsense. Warmer, but harder to fool. Still graceful, but no longer eager to abandon themselves just to keep the peace. That is what people fail to see. Libra is not weak because they break. Libra is powerful because they can break and still become better. Many people break and become bitter. Many people break and become afraid. Many people break and spend the rest of their life worshiping safety. They stop taking risks. They stop trusting life. They stop moving. They stop evolving. But Libra, at their highest, does something else. They turn pain into elevation. What hurt them teaches them. What ended them clarifies them. What left them makes space for what fits. What collapsed forces them to stop pretending. That is why zero does not scare Libra forever. At first, yes, zero feels cold. Zero feels empty. Zero feels exposed. But then Libra starts seeing something most people never notice. Zero is also clean. No old story to protect. No dead version to perform. No false role to maintain. No borrowed identity to drag around. Just space. Space to choose again. Space to build again. Space to become again. And that is where Libra becomes almost magnetic. Because there is something unforgettable about a person who can lose the old map and still trust themselves enough to keep walking. There is something powerful about a person who can say, "That was me once, but it is not me anymore." There is something deeply attractive about someone who does not cling to a dead chapter just because they spent years inside it. That is maturity. That is courage. That is rebirth. And maybe that is the real reason Libra surprises people. They are not loyal to pain. They are not loyal to old cages. They are not loyal to a past version of themselves just because it once made sense. They can honor what was and still leave it behind. That is freedom. So when people say Libra changes too much, what they often mean is this: Libra refuses to stay frozen. When people say Libra walked away too suddenly, what they often mean is this: they did not notice how long Libra had already been leaving in silence. When people say Libra became a different person, what they often mean is this: the old version was never meant to survive forever. Listen carefully. This is the deepest truth in all of it. For some people, breaking is the end. For Libra, breaking is often the upgrade. Not because the pain is easy, not because the loss is light, not because the fear disappears, but because somewhere inside Libra is a powerful willingness to begin again before life becomes a prison. That is rare. That is why Libra can leave a relationship and come back stronger. Leave a career and come back more aligned. Leave a city and come back more alive. Leave an old identity and come back more real. They do not always rise immediately, but they rise changed. And changed is sometimes more powerful than healed. So if you are watching a Libra go through a collapse right now, do not mistake the pause for defeat. Do not mistake the silence for weakness. Do not mistake the distance for confusion. Something may be ending, yes, but something stronger may already be forming underneath it. And if you are a Libra hearing this, remember who you are. You are not failing because your old life no longer fits. You are not unstable because you outgrew what once made sense. You are not weak because the ending hurt. You are not behind because you had to begin again. You are not lost just because the old map burned. Maybe the burning was necessary. Maybe the life you are grieving was only a bridge. Maybe the collapse was not punishment. Maybe it was release. Maybe zero is not your lowest point. Maybe zero is your cleanest beginning. That is the power of Libra. Not just charm, not just beauty, not just balance. Rebirth. The ability to be broken open and still choose a better life. The ability to cut ties with a version of yourself that no longer tells the truth. The ability to walk away from what looks safe when your soul knows it is dead. The ability to rebuild with grace, with courage, with taste, with clarity, and with a deeper kind of strength than anyone expected. And that is why Libra will always shock the people who underestimated them, because they thought Libra would fall apart. But Libra did something more dangerous. Libra evolved. If this spoke to you, if you know what it feels like to lose the old version of your life and still rise stronger, like this, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more. Some endings do not destroy you. Some endings introduce you to your real power.